can possibly can so that we could be able to learn from one another. This is not a sales call, so do not rush to drop off towards the end because no one's trying to sell you anything. This is purely the goal of this roundtables is to be able to come together, learn from one another, share experiences within the industry, and hopefully solve some of the pressing matters that we are all working towards as we are developing and growing our brands. We are here to be collaborative. So people who are listening in to us live, feel free to write things in the chat. And whether you have questions or whether you have ideas or concerns, we would like to, I will address them as much as I can. If you did not get your question addressed, don't worry, we will address it offline. I always get back to everyone to ensure that we are able to fully communicate and give a great, valuable insight. My goal is to bring value on every call. And so my really goal of this particular roundtable is to bring all of us together and build a community because we do have a lot of pressing matters and the industry is moving faster than we can keep up. And so if we don't come together, we will never win. So this is the only way for us to win the industry challenges is when we bring our knowledges together to the table. But before I start off, first I want to thank everyone for taking the time, whether you are listening this live or being here in presence and or listening this as a recording. I appreciate. I know you guys could be able to do some other important things, but you chose to be here, so thank you. And wanted to really start off by introducing myself for people who do not know me and just so to kind of what we do and why we do this. My name is Evgenia Alexandrovna Yushkova, or simply Yay, and I'm a founder of Yay Designs for the past 2 decades, and we have been really a great solution for a lot of brands and retailers to help them build, grow, and most importantly, find the path towards profitability. For the past 2 decades, I have helped fashion brands and retailers to build profitable private labels, optimize their merchandising strategies, and turn complex operations into a smooth, scalable system. Our job is to find under microscope and look under the hood to find the profit leaks and help you optimize them so that you are able to get maximum profitability at the bottom line. I've built and launched over a dozen multi-million-dollar private label brands for retailers from concept to the shelf. And we've been really firsthand how to create end-to-end processes and design processes that allow you to get to the profitability at the bottom line. We help to transform companies' supply chain. We look at financials. We look at processes on the assortment side. We look at how your design and processes are actually structured and how your assortments are structured, whether they are helping you to actually get to a higher profitability versus taking away some of the profits and opening up more profit leaks. So this is what we're really all about. And we've been doing this really with a small, tight team of consultants. Few of them are here actually on this call. Mary, Lisa are part of our team. So thank you for always being here and supporting myself and our clients. So, and doing a fantastic job with every single one of them. And really over the past few years, I worked with on both sides of the industry as a buyer and working with a merchandising teams and building out their assortments for retailers as well as on the manufacturing side. So I understand the gaps that often exist between creative vision and operational execution. My work focuses on bridging that gap, building the systems that let creativity scale efficiently without losing authenticity or profitability. And that brings us to today's topic is driving brand visibilities through strategies and through strategic process improvement. And yes, you would think about why brand visibility and how does that have to do with the processes? And we're going to talk a little bit about that today because it is an unconventional topic that we're going to talk and discuss. And it's not necessarily diving into marketing strategies, but it's really more looking at the processes that could be done and help you grow organically. And because here is really the truth, the visibility isn't just the marketing outcome, it's an operational one. And it really what happens is when your design, sourcing, production, and delivery processes are aligned seamlessly, that your brand naturally stands out in the market. So today we're going to break this down together and we'll uncover three proven visibility tactics that do not require paid ads. We're going to look at a simple but powerful system to capture customer insights and turn them into the retention. And finally, we will look at how to stay on top of the mind even when the trends are shifting every week. My goal is for you to walk away with not just a theory, but a real actionable tools that you can apply immediately in your business. Whether you are managing a startup label or leading up to 100 million retail organization, these strategies will apply. So let's dive in and let's start really transforming the way your brand becomes seen, remembered, and trusted. And before I start, I wanted to also welcome everyone to type in into the chat or into the comments if you're watching this live. What are your current challenges with the brand visibility that you're potentially experiencing? Or if you had a successful win, we would love to hear about that as well. What tactics actually help you to win some of this goals of towards getting your brand more visible. But before again we dive in into even further, Brita, I'm actually going to turn into you a little bit for a second because you hear this all the time, day long, from your people that you're working from your community. How real this issue really is about thinking, how do we get brand visibility? And how do we do it efficiently? And how do we do it from the inside of the organization versus just relying on the marketing team?
Yeah, so you want my thoughts on that? Is that what you're
Yes, I
saying?
do.
Yeah. So for the people that I work with, the brands, they're usually very small. So there's no marketing budget, there's no ad budget. It is organic. And what we really look to is the brand story, and how do you get that in front of the customers? Because that's going to build the people that align with you and your brand. So it's figuring out how do you really communicate your story and get that out there so that you can find the right people. And yeah, and it's not easy. You still have to craft your story and then get it out there in front of the right people. So yeah, that's a big challenge that most of the people I work with face as well, and they're just trying to do it organically. But I think at least having a solid foundation of what your story is going to be the guiding light to get to the right place.
And I'm so glad you brought this up because absolutely, story is a big puzzle piece, and it's a beginning of the opening up of figuring out how do we able to get the brand awareness and connect to people and our customers on the personal level.
Mm.
Because in today's environment, it's not enough just to create product. You really need to create that emotional connection, right? That bridge that helps the customer to fully be vested in your product and your brand story, to your point. However, what I always say is visibility does not start with Instagram. It really starts on the inside of your operations. And often I'm asked, well, why would operation have to do anything to do with marketing and visibility? Well, when your processes are consistent, efficient, and transparent, the result is visibly that lasts, right? Here are the three tactics that really consistently drive visibility for growing fashion brands, even with the limited budget. So, very first one I always like to start with is thinking about the process driven storytelling, right? Showing off your craftsmanship. And it really just does not stop by showing in how you created this product, but really telling the story of why this matters. When you're showcasing on how behind your product, you are really artisans from your artisans ideas all the way to the sourcing and all the way to the production. You're building an emotional equity with your audience. You are helping them to connect the dots of not just why this was, not just how you produce this product, not how you came up with this idea, not where this product or materials potentially came from and how sustainable they are, but connecting the dots of why this information matters. Why is this important to be part of the sustainable story and path? Why does it matter to go in and think about manufacturing processes that help you save water and help you minimize waste? This is when the stories that we're trying to build start to connect with the consumer and they want to follow and understand and learn more about it. Another one that I often say is thinking about the micro collaboration strategies. Thinking about finding a complementary brands or creators to create mini launches together. Instead of buying in an attention in this case, you are sharing it. The combined audience gives you a reach and credibility that paid ads cannot buy. And we often see this collaboration strategy implemented, especially in the early on stages when you are limited with your budgets. But it's also very important when we do think about collaborations is that we ensure that the people we're collaborating with are fully aligned with the target audience that your brand and your product is targeting towards. Because often our clients come back to us and say, well, we've tried collaborating and we've done here and here, but nothing really worked. And once we start looking under the hood, why? The often root cause of why it did not work is because they went after a bigger name, but they didn't go after the actual audience and making sure that the same audience of that collaborated brand is the shared audience that you're speaking to. This is where the trick really is, and it's important to nail it and do it right. The third pillar is to stay consistency through really systemization. Visibly fades when execution fails. And really thinking about building an internal system for a content scheduling, fulfillment updates, and customer touch points that you can visibly and rely and be visible and also be reliable on it, and that it will not come at random. And this is where the thinking about your email funneling and touch points and at what point the customer gets a reminder or gets a outreach or potentially gets surveyed of how their product was experience with the product was is a very important aspect of building out a system that helps you stay visible to your new upcoming customers as well as keeping your brand on top of their mind even after post purchase. And we'll dive in a little bit more about the different tactics as we go into this conversation. But really, there is no marketing tactic in this case, as you could see. They're all operational habits. And when they're done right, they create organic momentum and visibility that keeps really compounding. And with that, I want to pause and hear some of your guys' thoughts on what we just talked about. And maybe you guys have tried this before with your previous brands or brands that you guys are working or with your own brand. And I'm curious if that worked for you guys, or maybe certain things worked and didn't work. I'd love to hear all about it. Bradley, I know that you are about to start working with a lot of emerging brands, and I'm sure you've gave it a little bit of a thought around what we're just talking about. And how do you create brand visibility even for the brands you are going to collaborate with? What is your plan, and how are you guys are planning to do this along the what we were just talked about?
Exactly, going back to what Miss Britta said about the storytelling. I think, and this is my own personal perspective, I think if you do not have a story to go along with your product, there's no real reason for me to feel or buy it. So to me, my moniker has always been fashion is a feeling. You wake up, this is how I felt today. I'm from Northeastern Central Pennsylvania, so that's how you feel. This is how you feel. It's like, yeah, I wanted to wake up and wear a Letterman. But to the few people that I've been talking with, just giving them tidbits. What is your product that you really like? This is the product that brought you out of a dark place, that brought you out of depression, that brought you out of all these spiritual places that you go. And how do you want to tell that story? And a lot like what you just said, Yay, why does this matter? What is the offering to the fashion industry as a whole? Because I also try to work with their minds as well. Because right now you're on this little level, but you're looking at the Gucci's and the other houses and you're like, I'll never get there. And it's like you have to change from the inside out. So not to keep bringing up what Miss Britta said, but I think that's right on point. Storytelling, but also how do you make somebody keep thinking about you after they purchase? So a lot of the clients right now that I'm talking to, they do want to create a different box to send their shirt in. And it's like, you don't need a box this big just to send a shirt in, but they want to really make it stand out for you that once you get it, you're like, man, let me get back on the website and look to see if they have any pants to go with this hoodie.
Right.
So that's my perspective right now with the young partners that I have that are up and coming right now.
This is great insight, and you're absolutely right, right? It's all about the problem solving. You got to be
Mhm,
able to solve the problem for your customer. So
mhm,
it's not enough just to create a great product. You need to show the customer how that actually relates to them and their pain points. And
mhm,
it is all goes back to the storytelling. And then how do we then make that product and why we make it in the way that we make it, right? So that is part of the story that we're trying to tell. And
mhm,
being setting up your processes in the way where you can make it very seamless and transparent, this is the key. So that you don't do it at random of, wait, today we decided we're going to post about how we source this particular, and then we don't post anything about it for 3 months or 3 weeks. The goal is to stay consistent and maybe doing even a weekly updates of just little pieces that helps to understand consumer how this product is made and why it's made the way that it's made. Sarah just sent us from a live session. She sent us a question. We post process videos, but they do not really convert. How do we make a storytelling actually drive sales? That's such a good question and really goes back to what we were just talking earlier. Thinking about, because most process content focuses on what we do instead of focusing on why it matters. So instead of showing, for example, a sewing machine, show how the stitching improves comfort, longevity, quality, and fit, right? Translate the process into the customer benefit, then that's when the visibility starts to drive the conversion. If we're talking about fit, for example, this is another great way to talk about when, especially for the apparel brands, show the process of the fitting, show the process of the fit models, and then selecting the fit models so that and explain how it's important to stay consistent with what you guys are doing in your fit measures to be able to deliver a consistent fit to your customer, regardless of the season, regardless of the fabric or the style. I mean, this is what, and educate that customer on the fit, educate the customer what your competitors potentially, and reveal to the customer where your competitors lack in the fitting, right? Where they potentially may be doing too narrow grading on the larger sizes, or maybe they are just overall don't have a really good grading rule, or maybe they're a little more on the smaller side. Showing where how your product potentially is a true to fit product, and how you came up with that standard fit and why it's important to your customer, which will help you to convert that process story into an emotional connection of, hey, I'm vested in this brand, they get me, they get my pain points, right? So this is where, and Sarah, thank you for thumbs up, I'm glad this was helpful, but this is how we win this content and turn that content from just a content that we post to a content that becomes helps us to drive visibility. People want to share it because it's relevant, and people start converting on that content. Anybody else want to add anything else to Sarah before we move on to the next question?
I have a quick thought based on what Bradley was saying is so my daughter ordered, I don't know, a pair of boots or something from Amazon recently, and I'm all for, sustainability and supporting those brands, but it was a random pair of boots on Amazon. She received the package and the box was like Hermes. It was a very average pair of boots, but the packaging that it came in was so gorgeous. It had tissue and it had a ribbon and had this beautiful open box. So talking to what Bradley was saying about that package, going back to the customer touch point, Like that's just one touch point along the entire um, customer, experience. And that alone, we were both like, what brand is this? Like who, what, like how much was it? So just thinking about all those touch points. And it does create kind of that emotional connection because we were both so excited that it was like she was getting a top designer experience from Amazon. So just wanted to throw that in.
Oh, that's a great, and I'm really glad you brought this up because to your point, it is all about customer experience. Whether it's an experience of how they're receiving the product, how they're unwrapping that product, or what happens after the post-purchase of that product. What is the follow-up and of the brand with that customer so that they be able to feel like they matter, right? And creating that feedback loop and showing them that their feedback has been heard and things have been changed on your end to be able to address their recommendation or suggestions or pain points. David, thank you for sending in another question to us where it says we've been trying to do collaborations, but they rarely move the needle. What makes one successful? Really, the secret lies in alignment and execution clarity. We suggest do not just to collaborate based on aesthetic reason, which majority of collaborations start there, but really thinking about collaborating for shared audience values. For example, if you take a minimalist footwear brand and a vegan leather bag label, that would be a perfect synergy, assuming that both are in the same category and catering to the same audience, right? So if they're both catering to contemporary audience, female over 35 to to 55 with a very specific demographic, then that's what really aligns those two brands together is based on the audience. And defining really deliverables early on between the collaborators is another big key. Thinking about visuals, launch date, KPIs, how those visuals are going to be shared among among the two brands that are collaborating, who is going to be pushing it on from which side, and how you guys cross share the content is very important because that's where the second piece we see that's lacking in collaborations is that brands get excited, they create the product in collaborative way, they create the visuals, they create all of that, but then the follow through as it goes into actual launch of those campaigns and resharing and engaging with the customers on both ends often fails and kind of falls off the part. And this is why some of those collaborations might not be yielding the results that you hope for. And really thinking about that, it's what is really going to turn the collaboration into a real traction and presetting that as part of your KPIs to get joint KPIs and tracking towards those is going to be a key. So that is going to be very important to put in place as you are thinking about your next collaboration that you potentially might be doing. And also thinking about just overall, how do we drive visibility while we are working in on a lean budgets and in a smaller teams? And thinking about really maybe picking up a three reoccurring post types, for example, that systematic that throughout week 1, 2, 3, 4. For example, maybe you're doing one behind the scene, one product detail, one customer spotlight, and rotate them weekly. And once you build that schedule and once you build that framework, we call it content map, this is where then it becomes more of a process base that you are able to have your marketing team follow and be able to stay consistent with what you're posting, because that's the other biggest thing, is to be consistent and being always in front of your customer and not be sporadic, because that's the other thing, especially for emerging brands when they are working and doing multiple things. The founders are wearing 5 different hats. They tend to focus on marketing and creating brand awareness as I call it afterthought, right? So they do it this week because they had time, and then there is a couple of weeks of silence, and then they do another update 3 weeks later. Well, not only that downplays with all the algorithms, the other piece is that once you are out of the mind of that consumer, to re-engage them back takes a much more resources and momentum than if you are already got their attention, to keep them steady and keep them flowing. So having that as part of your process, especially for newer brands, is going to be very critical and important. Anybody else wants to add to that? Because I know that that's the biggest pain point. And Britta, I know that you guys are constantly talking about this with your brands, especially the newer one, the new startup brands, is how do I manage all of this and still be able to do the day-to-day business on a lean budget? Brita, how are you guys doing that with your, what are the recommendations that you give to your clients in this case?
Automation.
There it is.
uh, AI, Chat GPT, whatever it is you can find, that's helped me greatly because I am one of those entrepreneurs that wears five or more hats. So, for example, I just recently discovered another social media automation app, and it was generating pulled from my website and my socials and pulled all the branding and everything like automatically just by providing those links. And it gave me a social media content map. So I'm just experimenting with that right now because you still have to go in. Obviously, you have to read it and make sure what they're saying is accurate and they're
Right.
linking to the proper things. But I feel there's a lot of options and some fairly inexpensive to automate some of those things. So I don't think you need a big budget. I think a small brand, could come up with whether it's like Metricool is one of them or using Meta for auto scheduling. If you can map out 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month in advance, you spend maybe one afternoon, 4 hours or something, creating that content for the next coming weeks and the next month. I think gets best results. Otherwise, like you said, it's like, something happened, you had an event, you scramble and you want to post it, and then you can't for 2 weeks. So, agreeing completely with you on setting up a system that can automate for you and just make you more efficient is super key. So finding a tool that works for you and, even if it's a free version or a $20 a month or $40 a month version, it's like having your social media person hired to take care of that for
Absolutely.
you.
And
So
be sure to do this to add to what you're saying is to make sure that you give yourself enough time ahead of the time of your launch or any time you're launching a product or if you're launching a new collection. I always say you need at least 3 months ahead of kind of
Mhm.
pre-marketing and getting the hype going, right? So that people can catch on before you're actually doing your soft launch. And that's the biggest pitfall, especially with the newer brands we see is that they do it so close to the actual time and they don't have enough time to create that momentum, to create that engagement, and then they wonder why it did not work. So giving yourself extra time and work ahead of your schedule, working on your 6 months calendar, content calendar, for example, and being ahead of several months ahead of content creation and be able to setting all of this up is a key. So absolutely automations, automations, automations.
I'll
And
say
that's
working backwards too. Like if you know
yes,
you're launching in July, so then June, May, April, by April, you should have that content starting to it's ready and it's starting to get out there. So working backwards is super helpful for me as well.
absolutely. That's a really great add to this. Absolutely agree. I can't agree with you more on this. And this is where I want to kind of lead us towards thinking about capturing customer insights that actually improve retention. And because as we're starting to sell and we're starting to create that brand awareness, there is so much data and so much information that we could utilize among what comes from the customer feedback loop. And visibility gets you really seen while the insights keeps you remembered. And that's a key. And the brands that last are the ones that really involve their customer behaviors and be able to speak towards their pain points. But mostly really over complicated data collections often could derail you and actually get you confused and get too much over analyzing So that thinking about your data structure and the things that you are collecting from your customers so that you can respond back to is also key. And this is why we put that in the process versus putting that back on just the marketing team. Because it really becomes a part of a process understanding what type of data you want to collect and what type of data and how you're going to create buckets of that data so that you could be able to respond to it and analyze it. And here's the three steps, kind of process steps that works for, doesn't really, regardless of your brand size, these three process steps would really work. One is capturing, right? Thinking about asking the feedback everywhere you can. This is talking about how to integrate that feedback loop into your post-purchase experience. Following up, whether that's on the product page, whether that's an email that goes out or SMS that goes out after some time, asking how their experience was. Keep it short and simple. Do not create 10 question surveys. Create one, maximum 3 questions that are multiple choice, really easy for customer to respond on the fly. That could give you a significant insight that you can analyze upon and respond towards. You can also do it through Instagram polls. So if you are doing and have an engagement crowd that are of engagement customers or potential customers who are just following you, but yet maybe not have not interacted with you and bought your product, creating Instagram polls of finding what would it take for them to actually buy your product, or what do they think about your price point, or what do they think about your fit. I mean, those are all important data that you can collect on and respond, right? Thinking about your packaging. We've talked a little bit about packaging early on, about the experience of unveiling and opening up the package with with the product you receive. But what information is then in that packaging that helps you to A, collect more data, but B, as well as to convert that customer and revert them back to your website, as an example, right? Especially if you are selling on platforms like Amazon or Walmart or any third-party platforms. They're the ones who hold the customer data. So the only way you could be able to gain that customer data by converting that customer back into your ecosystem. Now, how do we do that, right? So some of the brands, offer some sort of a extra discount on the next purchase if they're going to go and buy it through the site. Some are doing it based on signing up for some sort of a community or newsletter so that they can be able to gather that customer. But what really drives the most to consumers to actually go and respond to those type of requests and in going and checking out your website is anything that has to do with warranty, fit improvements, or anything that has to do with the actual product that they just received. So thinking about a little bit outside of the box, right? And potentially maybe you are a shoe brand and having them going in and logging and registering their purchase, doesn't matter where they've purchased it on, so that they can get that 1 year warranty or maybe an extended half a year warranty or whatever it is, or potentially get a free gift for their birthday celebration. This is what's going to drive them back to actually scan that QR and make it super simple where they don't have to go in on the website. They just need to scan a QR code and it takes them straight to the form where they can fill out the information. Again, keep it very short and simple. But this way you are now converting that customer into your customer that you could follow up on email, you could follow up on SMS, and most importantly, you could be able to sell them directly through your website moving forward. Potentially also making sure that your assortment strategy is strategized in the way where not everything that's on your website is offered in all your other sales channels, because then there's really no reason for a customer who shops you on Amazon to go and buy you on your website. So thinking about the good, better, and best strategy and thinking about what are those key emotional pillars that potentially only reserved or limited releases that are only reserved on your website, which gives the value to the customer to go and buy through you directly versus continue buying you through Amazon because of the convenience. So capturing is really critical. The next piece is to categorize and thinking about how do we now take the feedback that we're receiving and group them by themes, whether it's a theme of a fit, quality, shipping, emotional connection. I mean, each brand will have its own list of buckets that they want to make sure that they collect data on. But as you can see, why I'm suggesting to do this into those buckets, because again, you will get a lot of different types of data. And figuring out now with AI tools, this really becomes a automation almost that you can create where it will take all that data in, and based on your logic, it will put them in different buckets so that when you are ready to address it, you can look specifically to the bucket of fit, seeing all the different comments that came in and be able to address and solve for that. Same thing for quality, same thing for shipping, and so forth. So categorization is important, and that starts as part of your process of thinking of data collection and what happens to that data next. Because a lot of brands, especially emerging brands, they do stop at data collection and they collect data, but then they do nothing with it. The next thing would be is to think how to convert it, right? And how do we act on it? So if the customer mentions the sizing inconsistency, we got to go and be able to fix the patterns. So, and maybe not wait till the next season, but able to figure it out how we could be able to address this maybe bi-weekly or bi-monthly, and then report back to the consumers, whether that's through your social media channels or whether that's through your sales channel outlets or emails, to let them know that they were heard and this was fixed, so that they could be able to gain the trust that the feedback that they're providing you is going somewhere, right? Is that it actually is going to be used, and that it's actually being to help you to improve the brand and improve the customer's experience. If they mention delayed shipments, then we got to jump in and adjust the logistics. The most important, though, I want to guard us against is do not jump to try to solve the symptom immediately. First, sit down and analyze and figure it out. What is the symptom is part of which root cause of why it's causing what is the root cause of these delays? Because often what we see on the surface is not necessarily what the root causes actually is. We have to ask ourselves five whys, right, of why this is happening to really get to the bottom and solve it at the core versus just treating a symptom. And when the customer sees you implementing their feedback, they feel valued. They stay emotionally connected with you. And that is how the retention really creates visibility through reputation of being heard. Latanya, I know I hear you nodding, and I want to hear your thoughts around this because I know this is where I think goes right up your alley, right? When you guys are talking to your emerging brands and figuring out how to be able to give them the ideas of stay consistent with their in close with their customer.
Yeah, it's definitely. I was nodding my head quite a bit because um, I am a grant writer, and I also help with a lot of business analytics for startup companies. I actually help nonprofits, and I help small business owners. And one of the things that sometimes is missing with the data collection, whether that's coming from your marketing strategy or whether it's coming from um, product, right? Like, getting feedback from your customers regularly on the experience of your product. A lot of that doesn't get recorded and then used for external funding. And I think that's a huge space for new, especially if you are in like startup stage and you're like, I'm still like at the, seed stage, right? Or pre-seed, or, you're going to move into, Series A and things like that. I help a lot of tech startups and folks that are in those spaces, and they're a lot of the time they're looking for venture capital, and they want to build their pitch decks and things along those lines, but they haven't recorded the customer's feedback to a level to really be able to convince an outside investor that they're constantly taking in feedback and they're using that feedback to improve their product. right? So there's so many different reasons for why you would want to collect data on everything that is going well so far, but you can also collect data on like your mistakes and then how you were able to, you know, kind of bounce back from those mistakes. And outside investors really love to see that from business owners, and even folks that are in nonprofit spaces as well, because your engagement is extremely important. And so, even if it's from a perspective of just being consistent on social media and getting your messaging out there, and then showing that you have the potential for many more participants in your programs, even that alone is something that outside investors really love to see, because it shows that, you know, your messaging is resonating, and therefore any programs that employ that messaging are also going to be successful, right? So a lot of this is kind of a domino effect. The um, so I think that, you know, all of these things that you're saying, yay, are resonating with me. And I work with lots of people who are creatives, who are building products, but also folks who are, you know, in completely different industries. And a lot of this strategy reigns true, no matter what industry you're in. So,
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much for your valuable input, because absolutely you are correct. And this is where it brings me to kind of also to pinpoint some of the common pitfalls that we are seeing for even our early clients who are coming in. And when we start to unveil of what they're doing, we often see a couple of the things: collecting everything and acting on nothing. Where we often, the first thing we do is we optimize that piece and figuring out what data to collect. We try to cap to maximum 10 touch points of what we want to collect on. Then we also, very important, create a RACI chart that helps them to prevent backlog or bloat of information, so that when the information trickles in or to a specific bucket or specific touch points, we know where that information needs to go in and who needs to be informed, who needs to be held accountable for it, who is actually going to use that to implement into a change. So having that as a, again, part of a process and be very structured. And again, now with with automations, you can actually even automate some of this, how that information flows throughout your systems or throughout your organization. But it allows the importance of that data not being lost and just being stored somewhere and never used. The other thing is to overreacting on the loud outliers. Really thinking about that, do not jump on trying to fix something just because you got one feedback of some sort, right? Sometimes people are vocal, and sometimes you get a really vocal customer who will call the manager, the sales manager, the corporate office, and now everybody is running around trying to solve this issue, thinking to make sure that you set requirements on your sample size that needs for that each of those touch points before you start reacting. Like, for example, you know, maybe it needs to be at least 2% of your total orders that are having this particular issue. Or maybe it's thinking about that at least needs to be 25 mentions of this type of an issue, right? Or maybe it's, you know, if it's a smaller brand, maybe you do it a sample size of 15. But whatever it is, making sure that there are some guardrails around on when it becomes a thing that you really want to act on versus when it becomes more an alert for you to watch out for, but not necessarily drop everything and start jumping to actually solving. Because most likely what's going to happen at that point, you're going to solve you're going to solve a symptom, not a root cause. The third thing that I will always want to bring in is to really fixing in isolation. It always needs to trace back to your vendor, to your pattern maker, to your fabric, to potentially maybe a country of origin if you're producing the same product in multiple different regions. Because otherwise, that defect will repeat itself next season. So you gotta be able, and this is where we talk about the root cause, right? So if your issue with the fabric tearing after 10th wash, don't try to right away jump to fix the fabric. First, go back to who this fabric came from, where the vendor is, how was it constructed, how was it dyed, how was it, but what are the processes that it went through, curing processes or whatever it is, because a lot of times it might not be necessarily the fabric, it could be the finishing of the fabric that has failed. So figuring it out, maybe it's something that the dye house that happened that caused this extra holes that are coming in if they were, if it was a piece dyed garment dye. So thinking about going the traceability and be able to trace back to the original makers of that raw material of that product and solve it at that level is a key and often overlooked when we are going at 100 miles an hour. And thinking to avoid how to avoid silent fixes. If you don't tell the customers you improved it, you missed out the opportunity on the retention and visibility lift. So your goal is to report back to the customers to let them know that you guys discovered, thank you to their feedback, this issue, and this issue was resolved, and report back on that, how that was resolved, and keep them transparent. So those are the things that are, I think, really critical for us to think about as we are working on all these different strategies of how to get our brand more visible and be able to have more retention with that content that we're putting out. The other thing I really want us to think about is how do we stay on top of the mind when the trends changes on a weekly basis? We all know that in fashion, and attention is really fleeting, right? We are one day we're one thing, and then the next day, by the end of the week, we're a completely different thing altogether. But really, visibility isn't about chasing every trend. It's about agility with attention. Here's how we stay on top of the mind no matter how fast the market moves. First, we build the trend response system. Assign someone to monitor weekly signals, trending colors, social mentions, bestsellers, velocity. When they have a micro production systems ready to react within 2 to 3 weeks. And this is only possible where you have a pool supply chain, when you have an agile supply chain that can react and produce things and make adjustments in a much quicker turns than the traditional supply chain. You hear me often talk about supply chain transformations. And if you're a brand who still relies on a traditional supply chain, push supply chain, where you have to order 6, 8 months in advance, a bulk order of production, and then try to sell through that and have no ability to quickly pivot and react back into the market with a smaller production runs and more frequent pace, that's where I would suggest to start looking, right? That probably becomes your root problem number one. What if you do have an agile system already in place, then taking next step further is to creating these signals, to create this ability to react to what's coming, what's changing quickly, and get that to the market with a test, and then see how that works, and then be able to then chase it throughout the season after that. Second is really creating the timeless anchors, right? Thinking about always keeping a core assortment that grounds your brand. You often hear me talk about the 80-20 rule. 20% of your assortment will drive 80% of your sales. That is your core. And that's what you want to focus on. You reserve small percentage of your total assortment for trends where you are chasing those trends, you are constantly testing so that you can find the new winners for your next upcoming season, or even potentially that particular season if you're able to repeat and get into the production in multiple times throughout that season and turn that product. This product really remind customers of who you are, right? They are the products that you are timeless, your products that are core is what the customer knows your brand for, what they come back day in and day out for. And having the sprinkles on top, right, with all the colorful sprinkles of all the different trends that you're testing, as long as they still complement your core and don't deviate you from your true mission, your true statement, your true story of the brand, is where the opportunity is to have some of that trend, fast turning trends, and try to test them. And the third, really thinking about the automating communication loops. And we've talked about that quite a bit already today, right? Using emails, SMS, using your community groups to share what's coming up next. It's not uncommon for a brand to create community groups. And it's really a great strategy to, again, creating this customer base that feels that they are part of your brand. They're part of the next collection design. Their feedback matters and they're going to stay engaged with you, whether you do that through social, whether you do that through external platforms. Creating that community part of your loyalty program, but maybe that is the reason why you get them people to get into your community, because they get different types of perks, they get presents on their birthday, whatever it is, whatever you come up that works best for your brand is, and then creating that automation is a key. The more consistent you are communicating, the longer you will stay visible with your customer and with your potentially later on customers that they will refer your brand to. Creating referral programs and automating those follow-ups is also going to be a key. And agility is really not a chaos, it's a structured flexibility. And where you're combining those strong processes, the visibility will become really sustainable. And as you can see, that it's a lot of it has to do with operations, not necessarily just putting the stress on marketing team and delivering that brand visibility. If you don't have efficient processes in place to do so, you're most likely going to fail. And so that is going to be a key, and that's important. So I know we're wrapping up our roundtable, but I'd like to open up to questions, last minute thoughts to the group that is on our call. Just kind of share if there's anything else that they thought through as we were talking about this, how we can help you to think about how to create your brand visibility outside of just doing paid marketing ads. Bradley, do you have any last minute thoughts?
Yeah, not really pertaining to how to quote unquote support somebody or help somebody. I think today, this is a lot more than I thought it was going to be, which is an awesome thing. This is literal groundwork or foundational work for brands, especially right now where I'm at, where brands are like, listen, I don't have a whole lot. And I'm like, well, what is your budget? I have about $1,500. And I'm like, okay. So this information right here is just, I mean, it's so valuable to anybody who can really take this and implement it. I have a lot of background in project management. I'm a project management professional, and I'm also a certified Scrum Master. And you are spot on about agility and the five whys and the feedback loops and asking. This is like I'm excited to go back to the people that I've been talking to because I think this is so valuable to anybody who is looking at pinching pennies for marketing. So this has been great. This has really been great. Yay. For all of you. For all
Thank
of
you,
you.
Bradley. That's a really important feedback. I really appreciate it. And yes, please do welcome anyone from your community to join this roundtables. They're absolutely free. Our goal is to really create more and more awareness, and we have do new topics every month. So we do host this roundtable consistently every first Tuesday of the month.
Mhm.
And all of our topics are posted on our LinkedIn page at Yushkova Design or Yay Design. So thank you, Bradley. I really appreciate for your feedback. Braden, any last minute thoughts?
Um, well, all of it was fantastic. This is super helpful. As creatives, or if you're working with creatives, it's very easy for them to get excited over their ideas and their designs and not think through all of these things that you pointed out. And it really is about building a solid foundation first. And to your point also about avoiding, big mistakes and wasting money later. If you set this up first, you have a much greater chance of success. And it forces that creative person to really think through, what their ultimate goals are and set that up first before you dive into making beautiful products. So it's great that you walked through all of those steps, and a good reminder for us creatives who want to dive into the pretty stuff, first.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate your feedback. And it's true. We as creatives, I always say we always focus on the sexy stuff, which is really
Yeah.
fun. And we kind of want to take all the daunting stuff away and not worry about it. But all of this comes out of the first few phases. If you think about the full roadmap of from idea to launch, this is where actually step 3, before we even start creating product, all of this falls under supply chain step, which with supply chain slash processes. This is where we start building right after planning. When we got the planning phase done and we have our profitable model where we're profitable on paper, this is the only time we start moving forward. And the next step is the processes, putting the process, designing what the processes looks like from all touch points, right? Depending, for starting from your design, marketing, logistics, production, product development, supply chain, all of it. And then from there, figure out who your vendors are, how you're going to execute, and only then you start designing the product. Because if you started designing the product before you did all of those things, you're most likely going to need to stop and move and go backwards. At one point, you'll reach that moment where you'll be like, I'm stuck. And then that stuck moment will be much harder to do when you have to take 50 steps back to do what you were supposed to do at the very beginning. So that was a really great feedback, Britta. Thank you for your valuable insight for today and getting on the call with us. I really appreciate you. Latonya, do you want to say anything? Last minute thoughts?
I was just going to agree with Britta that that spark that visionary leaders have, who often are creators, often are designers, don't let that go out, because that motivating spark is what is going to keep you building your clientele for the long term. And so I think that as much as we, kind of focus on getting started and, kind of focused on the creation part of the product, I think the creation part of your business model is just as compelling as a visionary leader. So I guess I wanted to put that out there for creatives as well, who are kind of new to the building, their operations, right? I think that you can be extremely creative there as well, and you shouldn't let your spark go out in that space.
I love it. That's a really great way to end that. Just keep the creativity flowing, even through the daunting processes creation. Yes, I like that. That should be a motto for next time. Well, thank you, everyone. I'm super excited to see you all on our next call next month. I'm really excited for everyone who was on this call, and I really appreciate everyone. Have a beautiful rest of the month, and then I will see you guys back in December. Thanks,
Thank
everybody.
you. Bye-bye.
Bye.